Chocolate does not begin in a factory. It does not begin in a bar, and it does not begin with sugar. It begins on a tree that grows in hot and humid regions near the equator, where direct sunlight is filtered and the air is heavy with moisture. If you like similar educational content, please like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends. This tree is called the cacao tree, and it does not grow nuts but large, thick pods that grow directly from the trunk and main branches, and inside each pod there is a sticky white pulp that surrounds the seeds that will later become chocolate. The pods are never harvested by machines because they are fragile, and cutting them the wrong way would damage the tree. So farmers use knives or machetes and harvest each pod by hand one by one. When the pod is opened, nothing inside looks or smells like chocolate because the seeds are bitter, sour, and completely unpleasant to eat in their raw state. At this point, chocolate does not exist yet, only potential. That potential is unlocked during fermentation. After removal from the pods, the seeds are placed in wooden boxes or piles and covered with leaves, which creates the warm and humid environment needed for natural fermentation to begin. Fermentation is not drying, and it is not rotting. It is a controlled biological transformation in which microorganisms break down the sugars in the pulp and generate heat. Inside the pile, the temperature rises dramatically and chemical reactions begin inside the seeds. The seed embryo dies, but at the same time hundreds of flavor compounds are created. Without fermentation, chocolate would taste flat, lifeless, and empty, because this stage builds the foundation of every future flavor note. The process lasts for several days, and the seeds are turned regularly to ensure that fermentation occurs evenly and does not turn into decay. Once fermentation is complete, the seeds are spread in the sun and dried until most of their water is removed. Only then do they become cacao beans. Dark, hard, bitter, still not edible. At this point, the farmer's job is finished, and the cacao begins its journey across oceans and continents toward factories where it will become chocolate. When the cacao beans arrive at factories, they still are not chocolate in any form because they are hard, dry, bitter, and wrapped in shells that must be removed before anything useful can be done with them. The first major transformation is roasting, which is the process of heating the beans in controlled conditions to awaken the flavor compounds created during fermentation. Each variety of cacao requires a different temperature and length of roasting because some beans release their aroma quickly, while others need stronger heat to develop their full character. Too little heat leaves the flavor hidden. Too much heat destroys it. Roasting is one of the most delicate steps in the entire process. After roasting, the beans are crushed, and their outer shells are removed using air pressure, leaving only small pieces of the inner core called cacao nibs. These nibs contain everything that will later become chocolate: natural fat, flavor solids, color, aroma. The nibs are then ground in heavy mills, where friction causes heat to rise and fat to melt. As this happens, the dry particles slowly transform into a thick liquid. This liquid is called chocolate liquor, or cocoa mass. Despite the name, it contains no alcohol at all. It is simply pure cacao in liquid form. At this stage, the mass is extremely bitter and intense. No sugar, no milk, no smoothing, just raw cacao flavor. From here, the cacao mass can follow two different paths. One path leads to producing cocoa powder and cocoa butter by pressing the mass under extreme force and separating the fat from the solids. The other path continues directly toward making chocolate. When the goal is chocolate, ingredients such as sugar, milk powder, or vanilla are added according to the recipe. But even now, the mixture is not smooth. It is thick, grainy, and harsh in texture. The taste is aggressive, unpolished, sharp. This is not yet chocolate as you know it. It still needs refinement. At this stage, the mixture of cacao, sugar, and milk still does not feel or taste like real chocolate because the texture is rough and the flavors are unbalanced, which is why the process called conching becomes essential. Conching is the long and continuous mixing of chocolate mass at controlled warmth, during which acids evaporate and tiny cocoa particles become coated in cocoa butter until the texture turns smooth. As the chocolate is kneaded and heated, sharp flavors soften and complex aromas begin to emerge, including notes of nuts, caramel, fruit, or spices, depending on the origin of the beans. The longer conching lasts, the smoother and richer the chocolate becomes. Cheap chocolate may be conched for only a short time. High-quality chocolate is conched for many hours or even several days. During this time, manufacturers adjust the amount of cocoa butter to control how soft or firm the final product will be. The goal is to make chocolate that melts perfectly in the mouth but stays solid at room temperature. By the end of conching, the mixture is no longer just a combination of ingredients. It has become real chocolate in flavor, but not yet in form. The surface texture is still unfinished, and that is why the next step is crucial. For chocolate to look beautiful, feel firm, and break with a clean snap, it must go through a process called tempering, which controls how cocoa butter crystallizes inside the chocolate. Cocoa butter can form several different crystal structures, but only one gives chocolate the perfect shine, texture, and strength, while the others make the surface dull or cause it to melt too easily. Tempering carefully heats and cools the chocolate so that only the most stable type of crystal remains. First, the chocolate is heated until all crystal forms are destroyed. Then it is cooled so new crystals begin to form. Finally, it is slightly reheated so that only the correct structure stays intact. If tempering is done incorrectly, the chocolate may still harden, but white patches known as fat bloom can appear on the surface later. This happens when cocoa butter separates and crystallizes in the wrong way. The chocolate is safe to eat but looks old and has a poor texture. Once chocolate is properly tempered, it is poured into molds of different shapes and sizes. The molds are gently shaken so air bubbles rise to the surface. Then the chocolate cools and begins to solidify from the outside inward. When removed from the molds, properly tempered chocolate has a glossy surface and a firm, clean break. At this point, the chocolate finally looks the way you recognize it. But it is not yet ready to leave the factory. Once chocolate has cooled and left its mold, it must be protected from light, moisture, and surrounding odors because it absorbs smells very easily and loses quality if stored improperly. Manufacturers therefore use layered packaging that blocks air and foreign aromas to preserve flavor and freshness for as long as possible. Chocolate must be stored in a dry, cool environment because excessive heat causes cocoa butter to melt and recrystallize, forming pale patches, while extreme cold causes moisture to condense when the chocolate is returned to warmer air, damaging the surface. Different types of chocolate are defined mainly by how much cocoa solids, cocoa butter, and milk they contain. Dark chocolate contains the highest percentage of cocoa and the least sugar. Milk chocolate includes milk powder, which makes it softer and sweeter. White chocolate contains cocoa butter, sugar, and milk, but no cocoa solids, which is why it lacks the dark color and bitter notes. The amount of cocoa alone does not define quality. What matters is where the beans originate, how they are fermented, how they are roasted, and how long they are conched. High-quality chocolate melts evenly and releases flavor in layers, while low-quality substitutes often feel waxy in the mouth due to artificial fats. Chocolate flavor is also affected by psychology. Smell, texture, and memory all influence how we experience taste. The same chocolate can feel different depending on our mood and expectations. Chocolate is therefore not just food. It is a product of biology, chemistry, physics, and human craft. Each piece carries the history of tropical farms, fermentation, fire, pressure, motion, and time. When you eat chocolate, you are tasting a journey that began on a tropical tree and ended in your hand.